Welcome to the channel. The Black Liturgy. The attorney's hands trembled as he broke the wax seal. It was June 17, 1854, and the parlor at Belmont Manor in Natchez, Mississippi, had never been so silent. 15 people sat watching James Whitfield unfold a document that would ignite a scandal so explosive, it would make headlines from New Orleans to New York and force a court case to drag on for 7 brutal years. Margaret Thornton sat in the center chair, draped in black mourning silk, her face a mask of composed grief. She had buried her husband of 23 years just 3 days earlier. Around her sat their 4 children, her brother-in-law, her sister, 2 family attorneys, and several prominent witnesses from Natchez society. All were there to ensure the proper transfer of one of Mississippi's largest cotton fortunes. What none of them knew was that in approximately 4 minutes, Margaret Thornton's entire world would collapse. Because the man they had just buried, plantation master Robert James Thornton, had done something no one in that room could have imagined, something that would violate every social code of the antebellum South. Something that would force them all to confront truths they had spent lifetimes pretending did not exist. But before we continue with what happened in that parlor, and why Robert Thornton's final act would tear apart everything his family believed about their lives, make sure you're following the sealed room. We bring you the true stories that history tried to bury, the scandals powerful families wanted forgotten, and the human dramas hidden beneath the surface of America's past. Drop a comment and tell us what you think drives a man to destroy his own legacy. Is it guilt, love, revenge, or something more complicated than any of those words can capture? Attorney Whitfield cleared his throat. Ladies and gentlemen, I must warn you that the contents of this testament are highly irregular. M.A.R. Thornton insisted I read every word exactly as written, without omission or summary. Margaret's sister Caroline whispered, "Just get on with it, James." They had enough drama. They had no idea. Whitfield began reading the standard opening, the declarations of sound mind, the revocations of previous woes. Margaret's posture relaxed slightly. Her oldest son, Robert Jr., aged 22, leaned back in his chair, already mentally calculating what he would do with Belmont's 3,000 acres. Her daughters, Elizabeth and Anne, both unmarried and in their 20s, exchanged glances that spoke of relief. Their future was secure, their marriage prospects safe. Then Whitfield reached the first bequest, and his voice changed, became strained. To my wife, Margaret Elizabeth Thornton, I leave the sum of $1 to be paid within 30 days of my death. The room froze. Margaret's face went white. There must be some mistake. M.A.R.S. Thornton, please let me continue. $1? James, check the document again. Robert Bolden. To my sons, Robert James Thornton, J.R., and William Charles Thornton, I leave the sum of $1 each to be paid within 30 days of my death. Whitfield's voice was barely above a whisper now. To my daughters, Elizabeth Margaret Thornton and Anne Caroline Thornton, I leave the sum of $1 each to be paid within 30 days of my death. Robert Jr. surged to his feet. This is insane. Father had over $400,000 in assets. The plantation alone is worth. Please sit down, M.A.R. Thornton. Whitfield wasn't looking at any of them now. His eyes were fixed on the paper, and the hand holding it had begun to shake visibly. I must read the primary bequest. The silence in that room was the kind that comes just before a storm breaks. The kind where you can hear your own heartbeat pounding in your ears. The kind where every person present knows with absolute certainty that their life is about to change forever. To Eliza Marie, Whitfield read, his voice cracking on the name, a woman of approximately 22 years of age, currently held as property at Belmont Manor. He hereby grant immediate and unconditional freedom. Someone gasped. Margaret made a sound like she had been struck in the chest, but Whitfield wasn't finished. Furthermore, I grant to the aforementioned Eliza Marie the entirety of Belmont Plantation, including all 3,100 acres of land, all buildings, all equipment, all livestock, and all crop yields current and future. I further grant to Eliza Marie my full ownership stake in Thornton Cotton Factoring Company, my shares in the Natchez Railroad Company, my property holdings in Natchez City proper, including the house at 42 Pearl Street, all bank deposits, all bonds, all securities, all personal property of every kind and description, and all currency in any form. Margaret stood up so fast her chair toppled backward. No. No. This is forgery. This is, James, you wrote this yourself. You're trying to steal. Mrs. Thornton, I did not write this will. Jude's husband came to my office 6 weeks before his death and dictated it to me personally. He advised strongly against these provisions. It was adamant. 6 weeks. Margaret's voice rose to a shriek. 6 weeks he sat in this house, ate at my table, let me plan his future, and they already written me out of everything. Elizabeth, the older daughter, had started to cry. Anne sat perfectly still, her face blank with shock. William, the younger son, looked like he might be sick. But Robert Jr.'s face had gone dark red, the veins in his neck standing out. Who, he said, his voice dangerously quiet, is Eliza Marie? And that was the question, wasn't it? The question that would unravel everything. Because everyone in that room knew exactly who Eliza Marie was. They had just never allowed themselves to think about what she actually meant. Whitfield sat down the will and looked at Margaret. What he saw in her face made him flinch. Mrs. Thornton, perhaps the ladies should. Don't you dare. Margaret's voice was ass. Don't you dare tell me to leave. This is my house. These are my children, and you're going to explain to me how a woman who was property yesterday now owns everything they spent 23 years building. I'm not finished reading, Whitfield said quietly. There is more. William's voice cracked. More. I further declare, Whitfield read, and his hands were shaking so badly now the paper rattled, that the following children, currently living at Belmont Manor, are my natural offspring and are to be freed immediately upon my death and provided for from the estate. Marcus, age 9, Sarah, age 6, and Thomas, age 3. The room exploded. Robert Jr. started shouting. Elizabeth collapsed into sobs. Margaret stood frozen, her mouth opening and closing without sound. Because what Whitfield had just read wasn't just about an inheritance. It was about 3 children everyone at Belmont had seen, had known about, had carefully pretended not to understand the significance of 3 children who all had light skin and distinctive features. 3 children who looked unnervingly like the Thornton family. 3 children who were Robert Thornton's sons and daughter, born to the woman who now owned everything. Caroline, Margaret's sister, found her voice first. Margaret, did you know about the children? But Margaret wasn't listening. She was staring at a point on the far wall, her breathing coming in short, sharp gasps. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely human. Where is she? Where is this woman who has stolen my life? Mrs. Thornton, Miss Eliza is not responsible for. Where is she? A voice came from the doorway, quiet but clear. I'm right here. Every head in the room turned. Standing in the parlor entrance was a woman in a plain gray dress, her posture straight, her expression carefully neutral. Eliza Marie was 32 years old, though she had never known her exact birthday. She had amber-colored eyes, dark hair pulled back severely, and skin the color of aged honey. She had been born enslaved on a Virginia plantation, sold south when she was 14, and purchased by Robert Thornton in 1843 for what the records listed as household management duties. For 11 years, she had lived in a small room behind the kitchen at Belmont. She had managed the household accounts, supervised the other house servants, raised 3 children in secret, in the shadows, where no one would have to acknowledge what they were or who had fathered them. And now, according to the document James Whitfield held, she owned all of it. Margaret looked at Eliza, and something terrible passed between them. These 2 women who had lived in the same house for over a decade, who had both loved the same man in whatever twisted forms love could take in a world built on ownership, who had both borne his children, who had both constructed careful performances of their roles, mistress and servant, wife and property, each pretending the other didn't threaten everything she had built her identity around. You knew, Margaret whispered. You knew he was going to do this. Eliza's face remained impassive. He told me 3 days before he died. 3 days. Margaret's laugh was horrible. He gave you 3 days, warning and me none at all. 11 years you've been in my house. 11 years I've fed you, clothed you, given you shelter. And this is how you repay. You never gave me anything, Mrs. Thornton. Eliza's voice was quiet but steady. Your husband purchased me. Everything I had, every moment of my life, belonged to him. To you. He couldn't refuse anything. He couldn't leave. He couldn't protect myself or my children. "I wasn't repaying anything because I never owed you anything. It was property." The word hung in the air like poison. Robert Jr. moved toward Eliza, and something in his posture made Whitfield step between them. "Mr. Thornton, I must advise you that any physical intimidation of Miss Eliza would be—" "Miss Eliza?" Robert Jr., as voice dripped venom. "You're calling her niece?" "C'est ça. She is a free woman as of 3 days ago," Whitfield said firmly. "Per the legal terms of your father's death and the activation of this will, Miss Eliza is no longer enslaved. She has legal standing, and she is, as of this moment, one of the wealthiest property owners in Adams County." The absurdity of it was too much for some people in the room. One of the witnesses, a banker named Pritchard, started laughing, hysterical laughter that sounded like it might turn into screaming. His wife dragged him from the room. Margaret was still staring at Eliza. "Why? You need to understand why. What did you do to make him choose you over his own children?" And Elisa, who had spent 11 years being careful, being invisible, being whatever she needed to be to survive, finally let something show on her face. Pain. Deep, aching pain that had lived in her bones for so long it had become part of her structure. "I didn't make him choose anything, Mrs. Thornton. Your husband made his choices every day for 11 years. He chose to come to my room. He chose to father children he knew would be born enslaved. He chose to keep us all trapped in a lie that protected him and destroyed everyone else. And at the end, when he was dying and couldn't lie to himself anymore, he chose to tell the truth. I'm sorry that truth has hurt you. But you're asking the wrong person why." It was the most Eliza had ever said directly to Margaret in 11 years. And it was the moment when everything that had been carefully contained, carefully managed, carefully buried beneath Southern propriety, finally erupted into open warfare. Margaret's brother-in-law, Thomas Thornton, stepped forward. He was Robert's younger brother, a lawyer himself, and he had been silent until now, watching everything with calculating eyes. "This will is illegitimate. It was extracted under duress from a dying man. It violates every principle of natural law and Christian morality. It will not stand in any court in Mississippi. The will was properly executed," Whitfield said. Mr. Thornton was of sound mind. He had every legal right to dispose of his property as he. "She can't own property." Tomas' voice cut through the room like a knife. "The law is clear. A Negro, even a freed Negro, has severely limited property rights in Mississippi. She certainly can't inherit a plantation. She can't own enslaved people. She can't manage business interests. The will is legally impossible." "Your brother anticipated these objections," Whitfield said quietly. "The will includes trust structures, guardian appointments, legal mechanisms specifically designed to—" "I don't care what mechanisms he designed." Margaret's voice had regained its strength, though it shook with fury. "This is my home, my children's inheritance, their future, and I will burn this entire plantation to the ground before I let that woman take it." Elisa met Margaret's eyes steadily. "Then burn it. But it will still be mine when the ashes cool." What happened next would consume 7 years, destroy multiple families, expose secrets that Natchez society had kept hidden for generations, and ultimately force a Mississippi court to confront questions about property, freedom, race, and power that the entire South was desperately trying to avoid answering. But in that moment, in that parlor with Robert Thornton 3 days dead and his will finally read aloud, all anyone could see was the wreckage. Margaret, who had lost everything except $1, in her fury. 4 children who had just discovered they were worth less to their father than the children he had kept hidden. And Eliza, standing in the doorway of a house she suddenly owned, with 3 young children she had to protect, knowing that every person in that room wanted her destroyed. The battle for Belmont Manor was about to begin. And before it was over, it would reveal truths about the antebellum South that history books would spend the next century and a half trying to forget.